Hey guys, so I know this book has been very heavy. If you need to take moments, take a break and come back, I totally understand. This book will still be here. Today we are going to be reading Billy's story. Big sigh, I know. Practice some self-care today. All right, let's get started. I met Billy Hale through a classified newspaper ad I placed shortly after my first Memphis visit, which, because of old-time residents' defensiveness, had yielded little information about Georgia Tann. The ad read, quote, "If you have knowledge of Georgia Tann or the Memphis branch of the Tennessee Children's Home Society, please contact ... etc." I received little response from ads I ran in major newspapers on the East and West Coasts. Few of the thousands of adoptees Georgia placed in New York and Los Angeles sought information about her in these publications, but they and other Georgia Tann adoptees who sought reunion with their families considered the classified sections of the Tennessee, Arkansas, and Mississippi newspapers, where I also ran ads, to be lifelines. I was contacted by more than 900 people, including a man who had recently discovered papers related to George's business that had long been believed destroyed. Other responses were emotional in nature. Elderly women wondered if I was the daughter Georgia had stolen. I referred them to a Memphis search expert, a woman named Denny Glad, but felt terrible for raising hopes that might never be met. Most calls, thankfully, were from adoptees, birth parents, adoptive parents, social workers, nurses, doctors, and others who simply wished to discuss their experiences with Georgia. They sent me correspondence from her, birth certificates, and hospital records, and described heartbreaking letters in which birth parents pleaded for their children's return. Almost everyone I spoke with referred me to others, and so I learned of Billy. Over the next few years, he would undergo several changes, but when I met him, he was 53 and living in Portland, Oregon. His hair was short and his voice was sad. He told me that he had always been sad, though not so sad as now, and believed the reason stemmed from his early childhood. But his adoptive parents had told him his memories were wrong. His mother had relinquished him at birth, representatives of George's agency had said. So basically, his adoptive parents were gaslighting him. Bruce and Gertrude Hale loved Billy and raised him first on a farm near Nashville in a stone house surrounded by mountains, then in a century-old mansion in Murfreesboro that had briefly served as the capital of the Confederacy. Painted white with green trim, the house had 6 bedrooms, 7 fireplaces, and 3 porches. On summer nights, Billy would sleep on one of the porches surrounded by stars. The sounds of frogs, katydids, and crickets, and the scent from the giant magnolia out front, said to be the second largest of its variety in the South. It was the perfect home for a child, flanked on 3 sides by water and bordered by all trees from which he swung and plunged into Stone River. He and his adoptive father built a boat they sailed on a nearby lake. Billy navigated coves, hollows, and beneath apple trees that stood in the water, catching bluegill and crappie and catfish and bass. And despite his loving adoptive parents and comfortable surroundings, Billy was always troubled. On the first day of school, he grew hysterical, crying, clutching at Gertrude's legs. She couldn't leave the classroom that day. It took 2 weeks before she could return home during school hours. Billy was terrified of using public restrooms and undressing in front of others. Gertrude obtained permission for him to shower privately. Billy's memories of his earliest childhood days included having been driven crying in a limousine with 2 black-garbed women and a tear-stained little girl. He also recalled having been told he was part Cherokee, but as the Hales patiently explained, neither that nor the car ride had occurred. Billy felt guilty, though his parents assured him he had done nothing wrong. He empathized with anything small and weak. When he turned 13, his father took him hunting. Billy knew he had to shoot a squirrel, but afterward he felt so terrible he tried to bring it back to life. At 24, he married a shy, slender young woman who seldom smiled, out of embarrassment over a crooked front tooth, which he quickly helped her to fix. He soon had 2 beautiful children and steady employment as a telephone repairman. But he suffered, as he had since childhood, from seemingly motiveless rages. When his daughter sassed him, he punched a hole in the living room wall. He later broke down a door. He recognized the incongruity of both dreading and ensuring the breakup of his family, but he was unable to change its course. When his wife divorced him, Billy broke down, and after spending 3 months in a psychiatric hospital, begged for another chance. But his rages continued, and 6 years after their remarriage, they divorced again. So scrupulous by nature that he separated the nails in his small workshop by both size and color. Billy became obsessive, inventorying each square of sandpaper, bolt, and screw. With his wife gone and his adoptive parents now dead, he felt rootless, desperate to fix himself in time and space. He wrote his autobiography, intermixing accounts of his grammar school grades and detailed hand-drawn maps of his childhood home with such as pleas as, quote, "Reader, learn from my mistakes. I love you and look forward to meeting you in the next life." In the 1980s, he met an attractive red-haired woman named Della and, charged with the possibility of having a family, entered into a third marriage. Then in 1992, he watched a television program that would change his life. 10 months after publication of my Good Housekeeping article about Georgia Tann, CBS's 60 Minutes had produced a segment about her. Billy had missed the original airing, but as he pulled out of his driveway on a Sunday evening 6 months later, on July 23, 1992, he was hailed by a neighbor who told him that CBS was rebroadcasting the piece. Returning his car to the garage, Billy climbed the stairs to his second-floor family room and inserted a blank tape in the VCR. The segment began with the bare facts, reported by Mike Wallace. Georgia had stolen children from the poor and sold them to the rich, and the state had done nothing to help her victims. Quote, "They simply closed the book containing the adoption records and hid it away. From shame? From a cover-up?" Wallace asked search expert Denny Glad. Quote, "As much as anything, to keep from having to admit that it ever happened," she said. Billy continued watching the program, relatively relaxed. Having read my article, he was familiar with Georgia's story, which he had believed didn't directly concern him. Born 500 miles from Memphis, he assumed, spent his time as a ward of the Tennessee Children's Home Society and its orphanage in Nashville, site of the agency's headquarters. He didn't realize that Georgia, who wielded more power than anyone in the statewide organization, regularly scouted children at the Nashville orphanage. But when he saw a picture of the exterior of Georgia's home, Billy was transfixed. Quote, "Della, I know that house. I know what's in that house," he said. All night, he remained on the green couch in the family room, replaying the video, suffering the flashbacks that had been triggered by the picture of the home. He flashed on Georgia Tann, enraged on a craggy-faced man in overalls who had huge hands, on a slim, beautiful woman with long black hair. He went to work the next day, but was too nervous to function. Returning home, he watched the video again and again. This was the beginning of Billy's obsession with Georgia. For the next 5 years, he would think of little else. He would leave his job, his marriage would end. All this was in the future when I met Billy 2 weeks after he watched the 60 Minutes episode. But I didn't have to be clairvoyant to see it. Della, exhausted, went to bed early the first night of my visit. I sat in the kitchen with Billy, contemplating what my article and the 60-minute piece that followed it had wrought. A middle-aged man led to recall things he might be better off forgetting, now driven to remembering more, his mind spiraling back and back and back. All right, pausing there for a moment. He is having an existential crisis. He is self-destructing. Clearly he has very self-destructive mannerisms, right? Mental health is extremely important. The gaslighting from the adoptive parents, like we were saying, that these adoptive parents would consider any child, doesn't matter the age, a blank slate, thanks to Georgia Tann, which is completely untrue. Like I said before, I can kind of see people believing that for babies. Not saying that's true, because it's not, but to say that of a young child who's already had verbal memories, when I say that, like they were already able to verbalize, I don't understand that. Anyway, we're going to continue on. "Don't get lost in there," I begged him. Della had said the same thing, but he felt he couldn't go forward with his life until he dealt with his past. With the help of Denny Glad and support of a therapist, he had begun to search for his mother, the results of which he offered to share with me. I had little to give in return, and when thinking of the slim, dark-haired woman of his memory, Billy asked, quote, "Where were the courts, the police? Didn't anyone care?" I was mute, but I eventually discovered the chain of events that had encouraged Memphians to allow Georgia to hurt, ultimately millions of people. The chain began with a natural disaster that occurred 13 years before her birth. Interesting. Very interesting. I don't understand how anyone could want to do so much harm and have no empathy. I know it was a different time, but, and like, it would be great to be able to be like, oh, but she's, she was a Cancer, she's empathetic and loving and stuff like that, right? Like, that's how people classify as Cancers. This woman was a fucking psychopath. Okay? Now, I am going to do digging into specific people that has something to do with adoption, whether it's an adoptee or an adoptive parent, a bio parent. You may have heard their names, you may not have, for whatever reason. That's why I said we'll do some digging in history and all that. But, I was talking about how she and I share the same birthday. I didn't learn this till maybe 2-ish years ago. But another adoptee, although he was kinship, right, was Nelson Mandela. He and I also share the same birthday. So July 18th, if anyone wants to know. And first of all, as I was doing my research, I just found out that he is an adoptee. But I always knew he and I shared a birthday, since I was quite young. And he was someone that I had always looked up to because of all the amazing things that he did. He went through a lot of harm. Now, we're talking in, I believe it was South Africa specifically versus America. But the point is that adoption is not solely a U.S. issue. I will just say this. Georgia Tann, while she did monetize adoption here in the U.S., her outreach was far wider than we realize, because other countries look to America in what we do in terms of politics and laws and all of that, right? And a lot of other countries tend to copy it. So we have almost every other country that has adoption, and I say almost because we'll go through each one, that we're doing the same things in terms of sealing records and lying about things. And now, in 2025, we finally have countries like Ireland, for example, coming out to apologize for the tremendous harm that they did because of the industry in those countries, right? Now, again, other countries are not privatized. There's no monetization behind it. There are countries where they do have international adoption. So they'll either send adoptees to America or they'll take adoptees from America. I know that's not going from America to another country is rare. It does happen, but it is rare. And we can definitely go through all the tables and stuff at a different point. But understand that a lot of countries started to shut down their international adoption specifically towards America, right? Because they realized how harmful America was. Like, openly. Like, you guys have to understand, we've been so bad as a country, openly about our treatment of adoptees that countries like Russia shut down adoptions to America, right? And I'm just saying one country, right? And yet we have so much more hidden. It's baffling to me. Anyway, we're going to read chapter 4 tomorrow, and I hope you all take some time to self-care.